Fairway woods are a really important club for all golfers, but you'd arguably say for your higher handicapper, they're generally more important. Now, the reason why I say that is because what we tend to see, and there are a few sort of anomalies if you like, but what you tend to see is that the professional to the elite amateur golfer to your single figure, they tend to hit the golf ball with a decent amount of distance. And then when you get to your mid handicapper and your higher handicapper, the distance starts to change. So the higher and the mid handicapper don't hit the golf ball as far. So that means that you're going to be dependent on using your fairway woods. And when you're using your fairway woods, obviously what we want to be doing is making sure that we are getting good contact each and every time. So let's talk about a couple of the basic things that you need to be doing. So I think in terms of the basic things that you need to do, you need to be able to control your low point, which means you need to be able to get good contact on the back of the golf ball. And I recently talked about a drill, and I've done it a few times, where I sort of talk about actually the way you're going to get good contact is what your hands are doing in the downswing. And this is where most amateur golfers tend to struggle. You see, most amateurs, their arms tend to move too much to the side of the body like so. They don't work down enough. So that upper arm doesn't move close enough to the body. And because your upper arm moves away from the body, it means that the club comes down too early, which is going to mean that you're going to be sort of pulling the club up in this hitting area, which is going to be giving you complete miss hits. And that's obviously what we don't want to be doing. We want to be making sure that we are going to get a decent contact. Now, there is also an element of technical problem, of course, you know, the arm's not moving this way, which we'll come back to, but also I think the length of the club. See, when you're using a driver, it's longer, it's lighter, but you also get to hit the ball off the tee. So there is an element of sort of, you know, I'm going to give this a good old wallop type thing. Whilst when it comes to your fairway woods, you probably don't have that same freedom. Okay, meaning that we have to make sure we don't have a tee, so we have to make sure we get good contact. So one of the things that I've done with a few students, which has been surprisingly good, is we've actually gripped down on the club. So we've started to treat the club, if you like, more like a little bit like a hybrid. And, you know, the results, therefore, are much more interesting and much better, because when you grip down on the club, golfers then started to have more confidence to bring their hands forward. Now, the reason why I'm standing like this is because it's very much linked to a recent video of mine where I sort of talked about this as a great routine to keep your head still, bring your hands down to get good contact. So the technique is the same. But obviously when we get into our stance, you would have a wider stance, you'd have your ball positioned slightly towards the lead side, depending on where you're hitting the ground. So do a couple of practice swings. If you're noticing that you're striking the ground more towards the centre of your stance, then maybe try and get your hands, get that right hand or that trail hand pushing that club through a little bit more, so it moves that low point more towards that left side of that centre stance. That'd be better. But grip down. Grip down by at least an inch, maybe 2 inches. Because what you'll also find is that if you grip down and you hit the centre of the club face, you're going to improve that ball speed. And by improving the ball speed, you're going to start to notice that you're going to get good distance, as opposed to holding it all the way at the top and sort of feeling a little bit clumsy and it almost feels too long, and then sort of producing a sort of casting motion, just where you're sort of throwing your arms at it like that. That's not going to be any good. So my tips are, when it comes to fairway woods, practice your low point first and try and get that upper arm moving towards the side of the body so it feels like it's really whipping and pushing that club through in that hitting zone. That's definitely step number one. Step number two from there is then notice where your low point is. So if you're striking too much in the century stance, then again you want to push that hand through, but make sure you don't do this, not your head. It's your hand that controls the low point, not your head. And then the last point from there would be quite simply to just grip down on the club to get rid of that sort of potential knee-jerk reaction to put it up because the thing's too long. And you could grip down on it 2, 3, 4 inches. Doesn't really matter at the moment. You can always grip back up if your confidence becomes good. But see the way I'm just keeping my head back on there, getting those hands working nicely over the golf ball, that helps produce a little bit more lag as well. But what it also does, it starts to bring confidence with the fairway woods. You can do the same thing with your hybrid, you can do the same thing with your long irons. And then, like I said, if you start to feel a little bit more confidence, and then one day you wanted a bit more distance out of it, you can grip back up again and apply the same technique, and then that way you'll get a bit more speed out of it, but you should still have the same embedded technique. See you soon.